What if Marineford reached that same breaking point? Ace got freed, Akainu started mocking Whitebeard, and instead of the story collapsing the way it did in canon, Ace's devil fruit awakened right there in the middle of the battlefield. Well, I found 3 ways this could go. In the first theory, Ace awakens too late to save Luffy, but just in time to kill Akainu. Akainu's magma fist still tears through Luffy. Ace still feels his brother collapse against him. White sees it and explodes in fury. Garp still breaks. Marineford still starts cracking apart under Whitebeard's rage. Then Blackbeard arrives, Whitebeard falls, and Ace loses everything in a matter of minutes. His brother dies in his arms, his father is taken from him, Teach is laughing through the smoke, Akainu is still alive. That's what finally breaks the lock inside of him. Ace's flames flash blue-white, the air around him distorts instantly. Stone begins softening under his feet. The nearest Marines stumble back because this is no longer ordinary fire. It's heat pushed to a level that feels closer to a living star. Ace crosses the battlefield before Akainu can brace himself, meets magma with awakened flame, and drives a burning fist straight through Sakazuki's chest. The impact erupts across the shattered plaza. Akainu is blasted backward, his body burning apart under heat even his magma cannot fully endure. Akainu dies at Marineford. But Ace cannot hold that power for long in his condition. Marco and Jinbei pull him away while Shanks arrives to stop the battlefield from turning into total annihilation. Blackbeard still escapes in the chaos. The Whitebeard pirates leave with Whitebeard gone, Luffy gone, and Ace barely alive after burning through his own life just to kill the man who murdered his brother. That branch is brutal. Ace gets vengeance but not peace. The Marines lose Akainu, the pirates lose Luffy and Whitebeard, Dragon turns colder, Sabo's memories return through grief, and instead of one dawn rising, the world gets a long era of revenge. The second theory is much bigger, because Ace awakens before Luffy dies and stops Blackbeard from taking Whitebeard's power. This time, Akainu still taunts Whitebeard, and Ace still turns back. The 2 Logia users clash. At first, it looks just like canon. Magma starts overwhelming flame. Akainu presses forward, and Luffy sees exactly what's about to happen. But before Luffy can throw himself in front of that punch, Ace feels something snap. All the guilt hits him at once. Whitebeard bleeding for him, his crew tearing themselves apart to save him, Luffy collapsing from exhaustion just to keep up. Garp sitting on that platform in tears. Ace's fire surges outward. His flames flash blue at the edges and white at the core, and Akainu's fist stops for a split second. For the first time in the war, Sakazuki looks shocked. Ace drives him back with an awakened blast so violent it rips the plaza and sends magma splashing across broken stone. Marco realizes immediately that this changes everything and starts screaming for everyone to move while they still can. Whitebeard sees both his sons alive and makes his final decision. He turns, faces the Marines, and chooses to hold the island alone just long enough for the others to escape. Then Blackbeard arrives. Teach comes expecting a dying Whitebeard, a broken battlefield, and easy access to the Gura Gura no Mi. Instead, he finds Ace standing over Whitebeard's body, wrapped in blue heat. Luffy beside him, Marco still airborne, and the Whitebeard commanders no longer collapsing in panic. Blackbeard tries to force his way in anyway, but Ace's awakening changes the equation. Darkness can still drag in Devil Fruit powers, but it cannot casually swallow a battlefield that has become hot enough to warp the air and melt the ground. Teach gets burned back hard. He still escapes because greed has never stopped him from retreating when he has to, but he leaves Marineford empty-handed. Whitebeard dies, Akainu survives, scarred and humiliated. Luffy lives. The Gura Gura no Mi never joins Blackbeard's arsenal. That changes the next era immediately. The Straw Hats still train because Marineford proved they were too weak. Luffy still sends the 3D2Y message, but Blackbeard rises much slower without Whitebeard's fruit. Whitebeard's territories don't collapse as fast because Ace and Marco are still there. Fishman Island changes because Whitebeard's shadow lasts longer. Dressrosa changes because there's no Meta prize. Sabo returns to an alive brother instead of a dead one. And the whole sea feels different, because Blackbeard is dangerous, but not yet overwhelming. The third theory reshapes far more than just Marineford. Ace awakens at Marineford, saves Luffy, repels Blackbeard, and then sails with the story all the way to Wano and Egghead, becoming one of the sons of the next era beside his brother. This time, the awakening happens right as Akainu moves in for the killing blow. Ace's flames erupt into that blue-white state. The clash tears open the plaza, and Akainu is blasted away before he can land the hit on either brother. Whitebeard sees both of them still standing, and changes the way he fights. He stops throwing his life away in a straight line, and starts carving open an escape route. That changes the entire rhythm of the war. Marco, Vista, and Jozu collapse inward around Whitebeard. Luffy, Ace, and Jinbei push toward the harbor together. Garp still breaks emotionally, but the execution has already failed, and once Shanks nears Marineford, Sengoku cannot afford to turn the battlefield into a massacre. Then Blackbeard arrives expecting a corpse. Instead, he runs into the worst timing imaginable. Whitebeard is wounded but alive. Ace is awakened. Luffy is still moving. Marco is still airborne. Teach tries to force an opening with darkness, but Ace meets him head-on. Shanks arrives before Teach can gamble further, and the war ends without Whitebeard's power being stolen. Whitebeard survives Marineford, but only for a while. He returns to Sphinx alive, though mortally weakened, and spends what time he has left doing something he never got to do in canon, preparing the next era properly. Ace trains under Whitebeard and Marco, learning to control the awakening instead of treating it like a burst of grief. Luffy still disappears with Rayleigh for 2 years. The Straw Hats still train, but now the sea spends those same 2 years under the shadow of a living Whitebeard, an awakened Ace, and a Blackbeard forced to rise without shortcuts. When the Straw Hats reunite at Sabaody, Ace joins them. Fishman Island becomes the first proof that this new adventure is real. Jinbei is there. Ace is there. Whitebeard's name still carries weight with Neptune. Hody still revolts, but the island is defended far more cleanly. Luffy still reaches Shirahoshi in the way only he can. He still becomes the heart that cracks open the island's fear, but Ace changes the battlefield itself. Blue fire floods the palace corridors. Hody's officers are overwhelmed faster, and the royal family survives without the island spiraling nearly as far into chaos. Big Mom still gets dragged into conflict because Luffy cannot help himself, and Ace stands beside him, making the challenge feel even bigger. At Punk Hazard, the alliance with Law becomes absurdly dangerous for the enemies. Caesar's poisoned corridors and burning labs turn into a nightmare once Ace's awakened flames start superheating the whole environment. The children are rescued faster. The lab is destroyed more completely. Kinemon and Momonosuke enter the story the same way, but now Law is betting on 2 brothers instead of one unpredictable captain. Dressrosa changes even more. There is no meta-meta tournament because Ace still has the fruit. Doflamingo has to lean harder into Smile production, his underworld roots, and hostages from Whitebeard's old territories to force the conflict. Sabo still returns, but now his return is not inheriting Ace's fire. It's about finally fighting beside both of his brothers again. The 3 of them in one arc would be absurd. Luffy wrecks the emotional center of the kingdom. Ace tears through Doflamingo's officers and pressure points with awakened heat. Sabo smashes apart the underworld network. Dressrosa still suffers, but it falls much faster under that combined pressure. Then Wano becomes something the original story could never give us. Ace reaches Wano alive. That changes the country before the fighting even begins. Tama's promise is fulfilled in person. Yamato is no longer clinging only to memory. The samurai are not just hearing stories about Roger's son and Joy Boy's heir. They meet both of them. And Kaido suddenly has a completely different nightmare in front of him. The rooftop battle becomes far more explosive from the start. Luffy is still the one with the strange, impossible freedom at the center. Zoro still scars Kaido. Law and Kid still rip the battlefield apart. Yamato still buys time against her father, but Ace adds something none of them had in canon. Relentless, awakened heat that can actually contest the apocalyptic scale of Kaido's later forms. When Kaido becomes the flaming dragon, Wano looks like it's about to be swallowed by the sky itself. Luffy rises in his liberated, sun-like madness. Ace rises beneath him in blue-white fire, no longer just a man using flames, but a blazing force that has finally mastered grief, pride, and purpose all at once. Kaido's burning dragon comes down like the end of the world, and the two brothers meet it together. Luffy breaks its will from the front. Ace burns through its infernal mass from below and across its sides, turning that monstrous firestorm into something unstable. One sun alone would have been enough to shake Wano. 2 of them crack the sky open. Kaido falls. With Big Mom and Kaido gone, Blackbeard realizes he's running out of easy paths to domination. Then comes Egghead. This is where the world government's fear spikes harder than ever, because now Vegapunk gets to look at both brothers and see the truth in real time. Luffy still carries the fruit tied to liberation. Ace, though, has become something else entirely, proof that Roger's bloodline, Whitebeard's will, and a fully awakened Logia can shape an era too. Vegapunk reveals more about Nika, the ancient struggle, and the world's fear of liberation. But with Ace present, Egghead becomes much harder for the government to contain. Kizaru arrives expecting to overwhelm a single Yonko crew. Instead, he finds Luffy, Ace, Zoro, Sanji, and the entire Straw Hat Corps on one island, all protecting Vegapunk. The light versus fire clash becomes spectacular. Ace's awakened flames can actually contest Kizaru's speed bursts by flooding routes, distorting the air, and turning the battlefield into a zone Kizaru cannot move through carelessly. Saturn's arrival still darkens everything, and the island still becomes chaos, but now the government faces something it was never supposed to face this early. Luffy pushing toward the truth while Ace burns a second path open beside him. Egghead still ends with escape, but the escape feels bigger. The world sees not just Straw Hat Luffy surviving the government's kill box, it sees Porcus D. Ace alive, awakened, and moving beside him. Two brothers the world once tried to erase are now openly sailing together as the front of history. And after Egghead, they head to Elbaf together. Luffy sails there carrying laughter, liberation, and the promise of a dawn the world cannot stop. Ace sails there carrying the fire that survived Marineford, Whitebeard's final faith, and the heat that can stand beside his brother instead of behind him. But what if there was a pirate crew so strong that even these two suns couldn't stop it? Well, that's the subject of this other video. Click on this video to see what the strongest One Piece crew ever could look like. Go ahead, click it.